What's going on, everybody? It is Shannon Williams, the OCPD coach. I'm here for a very, very special video today. So typically I sit on here and I'm sitting staring into a camera and I'm just talking to myself, going off of my pretty notes. But today we're going to have something a little bit rougher, something that is actually a lot more transparent, and something that hopefully is a lot more insightful than the typical content that I create. We actually have a very special guest. He is the founder of the OCPD Foundation, which is very, very awesome and something that we hope to continue to see growing over time. And he's also the YouTuber known as OCPD My Life in Degree, which is one of the actual pillar YouTube channels for OCPD. That's how I learned most of the information that I needed to when I first found out about OCPD. Again, it's unedited, so we're just gonna hop right into it. So yes, Darryl Raw Signal, I want to first of all thank you for hopping on this video with me, having this conversation, and I want to let you all know that this is the second half of the conversation. So if you want to see the first nearly hour worth of content that we did, where we talked about things such as, and productivity is the topic, but we talked about things such as, is productivity a good thing? Could it be a trap? The different camps of OCPD, and just even more good productivity goodness. So that stuff you can find that other half of that video on OCPD My Life in Debris. And yeah, first of all, hey Darryl, I want to let you speak before I just keep rambling.
Well, there's no possible way I could live up to that introduction. That was, I will take that. That was very, very nice. You gotta learn to take compliments in life. So thank you.
Yes.
Very happy to be here. I think we had a really productive conversation over on my channel to start out with. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, what we hear back about in the comments. I'm hoping people have some questions for us. I'm hoping people enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here on the OCPD Coach and continuing that conversation on productivity and procrastination.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a lot of different topics we plan on covering, but first things first, before we go on Darryl's channel about flow state, which is something that I really wanted to dive into. So if you haven't had a chance to go watch that video just yet, either feel free to stop it now and go watch the video so that you can get caught up. Or if you wouldn't mind, Darryl, you could give an explanation on what the flow state is and just kind of get us back where we were.
Yeah, and I'll get called out in the comments for this because I hadn't planned on talking about flow state. It was just something that we kind of naturally arrived at in our conversation. But like in layman's terms, like for me, like a flow state is it's basically like a highly productive state in which kind of the world around you kind of fades into nothing, right? Like you're, for me, most of the time I'm experiencing flow state. It's on the computer. So kind of the world around me disappears, like sounds are muffled, everything, that isn't my computer is kind of blurred. And it's just kind of like a state of like hyper focus that can go on for like an extended period of time. And I think if you talk to people that are familiar with flow states, there's probably things that you can do to help yourself get into a flow state. For me, that's not where I was coming from. It's more just something that organically happens now and then. And then we were talking about how it relates to, healthy habits and healthy approaches to doing things. Like for me, a flow state can be a great thing, but it can also be a negative because like I'm also ignoring everything else that's going on around me. So that's kind of where we left off on in our discussion.
Got you. So thank you. And if you all see me typing away, I'm taking notes. As I mentioned, I have ADHD and I always want to make sure I don't forget my topics. So something that's interesting is you while you were saying this, the only thing that was in my head word-wise was hyperfocus. And you mentioned it, and I was happy you mentioned it because they've always associated that with ADHD, which was the hyperfocus and the ability. I have this really bad or really good or really bad, depending on how you look at it, but I can work on something for days at a time and probably take like 5 or 6 hour sleep breaks in between. But it gets to the point where I forget to eat sometimes like I'll wait to eat until right before I go to bed. I won't have any desire to do anything that is not that. But the place where it becomes an issue for me is because it actually can lead to anger for me, and
Mhm.
frustration.
Mhm.
And this is something I want to know if you've also dealt with this. So if, for instance, I actually had this right before we started recording. I knew I wanted to record this video, but I was
Yeah.
literally in the middle of cleaning off towels so I can get ready to grow. And I'm like, oh man, like how am I going to pivot? Like how am I actually going to get my brain ready to pivot to that? But a lot
Mhm.
of times it can become anger if my wife is like, hey, can you go and can you watch? It'd be something simple. Can you watch the baby for 2 minutes? But it's like,
Mhm.
how dare you interrupt me when I'm in the middle
Mhm.
of this, like
Mhm.
this train I'm on. So is that something that you also deal with? Is that disruption issue?
Yeah, I think you could probably read my facial expression on that one. Yeah, that hurts. That is a. I mean, that's like we just started to touch on it, which is like the negative implications of. And most people, are not going to have a conversation about a flow state as a negative. Like this is widely viewed as a really good thing. People actively try to get into flow states in order to bump up their productivity. But yes, like that is the point. Like everything else fades out, and so disappointing people while in a flow state is my mo. Um, because I will choose the flow state over all of the other things that are really important to me in life. And I don't even need to necessarily be working on something that has a ton of value to me. I could be working on something that is pretty mundane, but if I get into something and it's just going and it's like, especially if it's something I put off, maybe it's something I put off for a few weeks. It's maybe something to do with a spreadsheet. So, like, oh,
Yeah.
like taxes, for me, I've got a few different projects I have going on. Taxes isn't an enjoyable thing. I'll put it off. And then once I get dug into it, it's like now that's like I'm in, and this isn't exactly flow state. It's usually more something creative, but I'm just like tunnel vision, and you better not interrupt me while I'm doing this.
Wow.
So yeah, you hit a nerve there. I think absolutely that some levels of anger and absolutely frustration play into what I'm talking about for sure.
Wow. Okay. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it was an unexpected topic, and I just wanted to dive in
Yeah.
more. But you mentioned the so I think this also leads to procrastination, which you mentioned earlier, which we were talking about,
Mhm.
because it'll be something like you said, not anything difficult, but something as simple as replying to emails. I'll see I got emails, and for some reason, I know it'll take me some time to sit there and read the emails. So I'll keep putting it off so that I don't start and not be able to finish it. And it kind of goes with the all or nothing. With if I can't do it all right now, I might as well not stop. I mean, I might as well not start. But then also something that you meant, which was something that was very triggering for me, which was I put shame on here, but when you have a track record of not finishing things. So
Mhm.
now that I call it shame because that's how it feels for me, I have that shame, I have that guilt, I have that feeling of, look, you're not going to finish either because you never finish things and you're going to start it and it's going to be halfway done just like that, just like that, just like that. So
Mhm.
why not just not do it at all? Or if you are
Mhm.
doing it, just don't interrupt me right now. And I get upset with myself sometimes with that as well. It's not just outward where people interrupt me. If I get distracted myself and I realize I'm on my phone too long, I'm like, throw my phone down. It's like, what am I doing? So, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add in there, but I just want to throw those things out there.
Yeah, I think this is a I mean, anything to do with stuff that goes on in the brain, anything to do with emotion, anything to do with feelings, anything to do with I don't know. Did I just say this? Mental health issues, mental health disorders. All of this stuff is like infinitely complicated, and productivity, I think, is an especially interesting one because and uh, I'll tie this into kind of mental health broadly, right? Like if we look at, I think a good example and one that there's been a lot of books written about is the arts, right? Do we have uh, you look around and you go to an art museum, or you just look at architecture. You go out into like a beautiful European city, for example, or you listen to your favorite album. Like, do we get those without mental health issues? Do we get, you look out the window and you see all of these high-rise buildings? I'm not, but I'm just saying, if you're in a city, I'm looking at a parking lot right now. But if you look outside and you see cars driving by and you see cities and structures, and do we get those without people that are struggling with mental health issues? Does Apple exist without, Steve Jobs was purported to maybe, if you look at some articles, he's loosely tied to like maybe having had OCPD, and nobody's in a position to diagnose him, especially now that he's not with us. But it's really, so my point is, right, like, I don't think that we get all of this stuff. I really don't, without people kind of suffering, right? There's always been people in life that are willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And I'm coming at this, and I'll get to my point, which is I'm looking at like you guys out there, the audience. I'm looking at you, like, you're here because something's not going well. You're here because you want help, whether you're on my channel and you just kind of want to talk about these issues broadly, or you're looking for some specific type of guidance that you're, on Shannon's channel for. You're seeking something, and we're here to have conversations about that. And so it's just very, very tricky. But I'm looking at this as, you either are highly productive and your life is being impacted negatively in some way by that, or you're not highly productive, but you have the desire to be, and that's eating away at you as well. And so those are kind of the negatives that I see, that I think, it's important that people, that have a platform like you and I have conversations about.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. We went into a lot of this in Darryl's videos, as far as being highly productive versus not highly productive, and what that looks like in different people. I want to know so I do have a few topics here, but my topics are aimed more towards actually improving the relationship with productivity. So do you have any additional topics outside of the, we have a topic that we'll bring up at the end, but do you have any other topics that you want to talk about before we hop into that?
So I think, like, the conversation that we had previously, we already kind of, what I just talked about, we did
make sure you keep
touch on a lot of the
for your life
perceived negatives, or we talked about self-worth and how we can develop low self-esteem from placing too much value in productivity. But the reality is the productivity that the effort that we're putting into productivity, right, and the areas in our life in which we're putting it in, isn't moving us towards the things that we find like truly important. So what you find in life, like you find in life to be important, and what I find in life to be important might be very, very different. And are we moving towards that goal? And is moving towards that goal aided by being more productive, or is our, hyper productivity or our obsession with productivity pushing us further away from that goal? So I feel like we've talked a lot about it pushing us further away from that goal. And I know a lot of the work that you do involves manipulating productivity and how you look at it. And so I think, like, we can now push the conversation more into the productive conversation on productivity. That was embarrassing. But I think, like, we can talk about the good side of it, or not just the good side, but like how to maybe look at it in a healthier way, and how to incorporate maybe healthier practices. I'd love to get into that with you.
Perfect. So I wish I had a whole whiteboard so I could have, drawn something out. But I'll briefly touch on just the the productivity actually being a positive thing, or something that you could take advantage of. So I mentioned this in your video, Darryl, how I take words and I make them work for me. So Whereas like success and productivity, everybody has their own description of it. But I actually started measuring productivity in different ways. So instead of when I was actually starting my career, productivity was primarily about well, obviously, you want to be smart in school, so you being productive there. But when I got grown, became an adult, and had bills, it was about economic status. It was about making money, and I wanted to make six figures for some reason. That was a goal, and I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I turned 25 when I was younger because that was a random goal I had. All of these different things that I would do would always be trying to be more productive and get to that goal. As I got older, I realized that that was unproductive, and it was counterproductive. It was actually causing me strife in life because I put all of my worth inside of the job, inside of finances. So when you don't have that job, when you don't have the money, then who are you? You feel worthless. And now what I try to do is I have productivity that I measure for economics. So that's being financially responsible and making sure I'm putting money into retirement savings or paying towards my home, like economically. And then I have productivity that is for my relationship. So that's a relationship with my wife and my family. And I call that a tier one relationship, by the way. That's tier one. Then you have multiple tiers with people that you still core having in your family. But that is an entirely different thing. So productivity for that might be going on a walk with my wife, taking my son to Disney World for the weekend. Like these different things that are helping out that relationship are being productive. It's being productive still if I'm doing it. And then I have the other things which are just quality of life things for me. So I mentioned this on the channel, and I actually have a video about this when I first got the PlayStation 5, but I needed to play Spider-Man because I never played Spider-Man 2.
I feel like I'm missing out on this game. Like you keep bringing it up. I'm like, I got to get my hands on this. Apparently,
yeah, it's the only game. The only game I play on next gen outside of Guardians of the Galaxy is Spider-Man 2. Really, like it seriously played until like the storyline. And it was the thing I brought up earlier about if I'm a game developer, I don't like to really play other people's games because I need to be working on my game. It's that whole trade-off.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something that I have done is just separating the productivity so it's not just this one productivity that the world tries to make you think is the one, which is just go work for the rest of your life or until you can retire and become a millionaire because I mean ultimately you'll miss out on a lot of things. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm pitching to you and see what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So for me, in terms of what I would talk to people about in regards to productivity, and I'm going to use the work that I do with the foundation as a little bit of an example, but I'll proceed that with the work that I do on the foundation and my YouTube channel is. There's no crossover there. They're not connected in any way. So when I'm here, I'm not here as, although I can see it says it down below, but I'm not here as the founder of OCPD.org. It happens to be something that I'm involved in, but I'm here as OCPD, My Life in Debris, the YouTube channel. Because this is like an open space to talk about opinions and personal experiences and things like that. So that said, I'll use the foundation as an example. It can be extremely easy to have very large, grand, broad goals. And for somebody with OCPD or OCPD-like traits, this is a really easy way to like overwork yourself and to overwork yourself, but also to like not be as productive as you want to be. So the first thing that comes to mind, talking about this is like sharpening and narrowing your goals. So what I mean is like for the foundation, like I could work on the foundation 24/7. There's never going to like not be more work that I can do. So deciding in advance what it is I'm trying to do and making that as specific of a goal as possible. And we mentioned this in the last video. You were talking about jujitsu, right? Was what you had started, and you talked about using different metrics to measure progress. And so it's similar with any project that I'm working on. I'm not looking at the big picture, because the big picture is always going to be there. I'm deciding, like, okay, well, today or this week, here's a much more bite-sized. I mean, this is kind of basic stuff as well. I'm aware of that, but we need to be reminded sometimes. So it's like bite-sized pieces that are very measurable, that I can tackle and get that sense of accomplishment, but also minimize the amount of time that needs to be spent on it, and kind of tying back into the flow state, right? Like, if I've got a bite-sized piece that's 2 hours and I've got 2 hours left in the workday, perfect. If I've got a bite-sized piece that's 4 hours and I've got 2 hours left in the workday, and I want to have a happy, peaceful, calm life, then I don't start that 4 hour chunk. That 4 hour chunk goes to when I have a 4 hour time slot available. I find something that I can do in 2 hours. And so I think really breaking down what you're trying to do is going to allow you to feel more accomplished. It's going to allow you to approach it in a healthier way, and and just get that balance, right? Because a lot of productivity goes into all areas, but I think where people struggle with it the most is definitely like secularly or maybe higher education. And so I think it's important to kind of acknowledge that, and that's what we're talking about. So sorry, my heater kicked on. I think
I don't hear it.
Okay, good. So so just responding to you, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind, would be to make your goals more well-defined. That's how I would put it. Make your goals more well-defined.
And that's perfect. That literally ties into the next topic that I want to talk about, which was measuring and tracking productivity. So now that we're into positives, or at least different ways to use your productivity to your advantage, Darryl mentioned a lot of it, but being able to actually measure your productivity in ways that I put on here SMART goals, because I really believe in them, but in ways that are realistically chunkable and realistically attainable. So one of the things that I've always dealt with is lack of perspective. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. Unrealistic expectations. There it is. So if, for instance, I wanted to learn how to build video games, I've been doing it for 2 months, just learning at home. And 2 months later, I'm like, I can build GTA 5. All I need is $5,000. And I was really convinced in my head. I was really convinced, because that was just how naive and ignorant I was. But I tend to have that all the time, where if I'm putting something out, it has to be the best. What I realized though is, once you do that, so let's say if we're going to take that for an example, we'll take building GTA, building a Grand Theft Auto video game, a $1 billion game, as a single person, as an example. If I were to do it the right way, I would have started by, first of all, defining that acceptance criteria, or the MVP for what that final product would be. So what does the game have to have? It has to have somebody who can walk around, you pull weapons for some reason, get in cars, these different elements. And then once I have the MVP defined, I go in and actually break those up into different chunks of tasks. The part where I would realize, hey, this is going to take me 7 or 8 years based on how many tasks I have to actually do. That is something that I've noticed with clients I've worked with, and then also with myself. We might, you said it's probably something that's really basic as far as going and just breaking out tasks, but we actually don't do it. I don't think of it, we think we're above it, or like not on purpose where it's just out of arrogance, but just where it's like, why would we need to do that? Like, we know what we need to do. But everyone I run into, they don't tend to do that. They don't break the task down. It's always, I'm looking at the end result and I'm not beating that end goal. So do you have anything else you want to add on the SMART goals, settings criteria?
No, but the unrealistic expectations, right? Like, that is what perfectionism is. And you know, I don't think maybe that word's come up enough in our conversation so far. You know, when we started over on my channel, I mentioned it, I think, just once. But yeah, it is about part of the reason that we're going to struggle with productivity and how it affects our mood is if we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? And so having a perfectionistic mindset is like, before we even do anything, we're like, we've already failed before we've begun. If the end goal is perfection or something close to it, and another way of phrasing that, right, would be to having unrealistic expectations. So, like, you know, tying it back to what I was saying is like, yeah, like not having these giant, broad goals is a critical component of doing that. And I have been subject to this many times. Like, I'm not, you know, for most of my life, I wasn't impervious to this at all. You know, I suffered greatly with this. And so starting projects and abandoning them was a hallmark of mine, because you get into the weeds and your goals and ambitions are so high that it becomes just overwhelming, right? Like, you're looking so far into the future. And for me, like that, I don't know how much that ties into OCPD, but for me, like, I get very, very overwhelmed if I try and like go too far out with stuff. That's why like accomplishing some of the stuff I've like accomplished, like really, really required me to change my mindset, make some pretty large adjustments, and to deal with a lot of the stuff that comes up with OCPD. Because, you know, prior to doing that, I couldn't looking a month into the future was difficult. So if I'm going to build something that endures, I've got to look a lot further than a month down the road. And creating realistic expectations, and breaking things apart is, I guess, part of how I did that.
Nice. Well, that's definitely helpful to hear that you are also doing this. And something to follow up on this is, it's kind of something that you mentioned, not going too far out, right? That was the statement. But what are your opinions on software management tools or task management tools, such as I always mention Jira. I'm not sponsored. You all should sponsor me at this point. But I've used tools like Trello. They really should. I'm always making videos about it. But what do you? I mean, you have different tools like Trello. There's one called Notion. As I've always mentioned, I use Jira. But what are your opinions on people using tools like this in their personal life, or actually using these different agile strategies, such as working in 2-week increments and planning out your work for as far as you can see for like months at a time, where you have visibility on it? What's your opinion on people living like doing that approach?
I think like what I mentioned when we were talking about progress and productivity in in the last video, I think applies, which is a lot of things that we view as good or bad, they're not good or bad. It's like we're attributing that to them, right? They just exist. There's something, they're a thing, and we're going to decide if they work for us or if we are a slave to them. And this applies to many, many things. So I think that's applicable. I think like if you're using these tools and they're aiding you, then yeah, that's fantastic. I have used over the years many different tools to like various, effectiveness. So I think it's like if you can find a way to do it in a healthy manner, which I think is what you try to help people do. Like you're trying to get people to use these tools in a way that is helping them be productive without being hyper focused, hyper productive, or like obsessed, right? Like that's a big word for us. So yeah, I mean, that's a ramble, but like long story short, I think that these tools can be very, very helpful. For me, I had to pare down to like I'm a slave to I'm a slave to iOS. You saw the thumb, right? Like,
Yeah.
I guess
You must
that's
have a like M1
this is new
for
software, so I guess that's a thing that this is going to do. So I got to be mindful of that. But yeah, so I had to pare down to just using, I think, at this point, I'm literally just no. That's a lie. If I'm going to be transparent, I use Bear. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Bear, which is probably on all platforms. But I do use the built-in Notes app a little bit. That's more for like an individual task that's like laid out. Whereas like my general notes, I'll use Bear. So yeah, I use these apps. I think as long as they're not causing you more anxiety and more stress, yeah, by all means.
Got it. Okay. I've always been interested to know what others thought about that approach because I know when I brought it up originally with me taking my work. So this is hot topic, whatever it is. But my approach is very, as you mentioned when we first spoke, logical, right? So I try to take things and I try to break it down in a way that makes sense. So systems make sense to me, processes make sense to me, structures make sense to me. And I realized what I was doing at work with these different tools was actually helping me stay accountable to myself. So I took that and actually did it for my personal life. One of the complaints that I've seen, though, not just on mine, but just in general, that could be related is that people don't want their life to feel like work. And I think that ties into productivity with us talking about, you asked earlier about productivity being a trap. That's just something that I wanted to just talk about that really briefly. Like, what is your opinion on people looking at you doing? I don't know if it's because you're so organized with it, with the Jira task, or what it is, but people don't want their life to feel like work.
So, I think, like, broadly speaking, like these apps or these different pieces of software are really organizational tools. And I think that if you can treat it as an organizational tool, then it can be very useful. I don't think it's something that everybody needs, but like if it is something that you want, I think if you use it as an organizational tool, it's great. And that's where I'm at in my life now, is that the things that go onto these lists, I'm not, and I keep using this word, but I think it's applicable, which is like, I'm not a slave to these things. So when I go to bed at night, if I open up one of these, and that's not the best time to do that, but like if you open up one of these things, right, and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, like there's too many of these things, like some apps, right, it puts a line through it, some there's like a box that it ticks, some it removes it entirely, whatever. But you're like, oh man, not enough of these things have lines through them. Like that's going to keep me up all night, and that's not how I'm using it. I'm looking at this as like, oh, these are like this page is like my work items, or this page is correspondences I need, people I need to get back to. This page is household tasks, and I'm not using it as a way to structure my day or time keep. And even that's not bad, because I think that's part of what you do. But I'm just saying, for me, in order to do it in a way that's healthy, like it's just a way to organize my thoughts, and I'm not using it as like a directive for my life. And I think when you're talking about people saying that to you, like that's what they're afraid of, right? They don't want to live their life off of these lists. But like we've been writing stuff down for centuries, like putting stuff down, totally an acceptable thing to do. It's just like, don't define yourself by how much you got done in a day, because like, does it matter? Like does it really matter? Like, and I guess it does, right? If that's what you prioritize in life. But like for most people, like for 99% plus people, like the most important thing in life is like love. It's relationships. It's beauty. It's nature. It's not, did I like dust every surface of my home, do all the dishes, do all the laundry? Like, at the end of your life, you are not going to be thinking about those things. Like we've seen enough we've known people in our lives that have passed away. We've seen it in entertainment. Like, these are not the final thoughts that go through someone's mind, right? Like, did I leave the lights on? Like, that's not what you're thinking, you know?
Right.
So we're thinking about all of the people and things that mean the most to us in life. So yeah, like,
And
treat it as a tool, and it can be a timekeeping tool as well. That's fine. I don't use it for that, but as long as you're using it as a tool and not a manual for how to live,
right.
especially if it leaks into like the leisure side of your life, right? If it's like, I'm gonna go, swimming for 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna rest for 3 minutes, and then I'm gonna read a book for 8 minutes, or that's a weird schedule, but like, I think you get what I'm
I
saying.
get you. Yeah, and I think that's something that I love to clarify since we're on that topic. So, I actually started doing this because it's, as I mentioned in the other video, go check it out. Um, it's that, what have you done for me lately, right? What I tend to notice is when anytime I talk with individuals who have OCPD, we only really remember the failures a lot of times. See, that's the stuff that sticks out to us. It's the stuff we didn't do, or the stuff we failed to do, or things we just sucked at, quote unquote. And when I ask individuals to go and write down things that you actually did do good at, or things that people actually complimented you on, they always come back and tell me. I've had somebody come back with a tear and tell me that they didn't realize they were being so hard on themselves because they were only looking at the negative things. So the way I actually started using this recently is having individuals use the tool how I use the tool, so that you can get those little dopamine hits as you do complete things, because you're going to do it. I mean, most of the time we do things, so it's not to say, hey, I'm forcing you to do it, but it's just to
Mm.
see how much work you have done at the end of the week. And I love to do, this is the final topic I have on this sprint productivity cycle, but what I like to do is, to avoid burnout, I like to do two strong sprints, and my sprints are 2 weeks long. So I'll assign work for myself to do in a 2 week period. Some stuff I don't want to do, some stuff I do want to do, just so I can have a nice balance. And then I'll do two sprints of that, so that's 4 weeks. And then I'll do another sprint, which is another 2 weeks, and that's a recovery or celebration sprint. So that's like, I hardly throw any hard task in there, but I'll have fun. I'll try to do something that's out of my element to really
Mm.
just celebrate myself. So there, that was that's just a tip I want to throw out there for sprints and productivity. Um, we talked about leisure a good amount. I mean, we're already 30 minutes into this video, so I don't want to keep drilling it in. But I do want to ask, I know we briefly talked about if the pursuit of productivity was moving you towards the things in life that are truly important. Do you
Mm.
think that we touched on that enough, or do you want to add anything else additional to that?
No, I think for the sake of our audience, like, I don't want to go on and on and on about it, but I do want to go back just one last point of what we were just talking about, which is these tools that we're talking about, right? Like, right now we're talking specifically about apps, but there's other tools out there, right, that you can use for productivity. Um, they what I was thinking about is, like, you go by the OCPD coach. Like, what does a coach do? Like, well, one of the things a coach does, right, is they train. And I think that using these apps or using these tools, like, for me, a lot of it is trying to train myself to get into a specific habit. And so I'm more like, the more that these things are used as training devices, the more pro I am of them. Because I don't necessarily feel great about the idea of being locked into these things for, if it wasn't for the work I do, I would get rid of my smartphone tomorrow. Like, I have no
Mhm.
doubt about that. And if I did that, then I wouldn't have these apps. So for me, they're training. And, like, I actually have this. It's going to be on camera. This new thing that I'm doing is biofeedback. And I'm not going to get into all of what biofeedback is, but it's essentially like retraining my breathing. And so I don't want to have to use this biofeedback for the next 20 years. But, if I've got to use it for the next 6 months, year, 2 years, to get my breathing to regulated better, I guess would be a way to put it. Like, I'm willing to do that. And so I think that approaching these tools, like if you're scared, like, oh, I don't want to live my life off of these things. Well, try not to. Try to get to a point where you don't need them, but view them as a short-term way to kind of keep you in line in terms of like what it is you're trying to do with them. And know that in the long term, you want to just develop habits that you don't rely on all of these things to do.
That's good. That's really good. So thank you. I'm actually sorry, you all. We have been talking for a long time, over an hour and a half, and I know my mouth is dry.
I think it's still shorter than our first attempt at a video together, but yeah, it's still like a long time. Yeah.
It's very structured this time, so we appreciate it. So I want to thank you again, Darryl, for hopping on and collaborating
My
with
pleasure.
me. The goal is to try to do more of these. I mean, we're getting a feel for them. We'll see if you all find them useful. And then we love to get your feedback too. If you have things you would love us to address, just do it. I mean, we're very transparent, we're open, and we want to help. Something else I wanted to just throw out here, and this is just kind of a bonus thing, but everybody has their opinions on AI, and there are different forms of it that are acceptable and they can be exploited. But what I wanted to mention is the improving your productivity through use of different tools. I actually use something called Glean AI. Again, not a sponsor, but Glean is something that I use to edit my videos. So you'll see recently I've been editing my own videos, and it helps me cut everything up really quick, knock it out. That is something that I found useful, having OCPD and having issues delegating, because a lot of times I would have a vision for a video and I'd send it over and it wouldn't come back how I wanted it. But this allows me to be that collaborator in real time and work with the tool to get exactly what I need. So if you are anybody who you're having that issue of trying to just improve the productivity and you don't know what you can do to help yourself out, I think you can use some AI tools and just be mindful. I mean, if it's generating art and you're trying to sell the art and do these different things, I mean, be mindful of that, but just try to see what you can do to help yourself. I mean, that's honestly all you can do each day with this stuff. And yeah, with that, I want to wrap it up. The links are going to be in the description for not only the video that we did on Darryl's channel, which is again OCPD, My Life in Debris, but also for some documents where you can use this as templates. Sorry, my mouth is so dry I can't talk, but you can use these documents as templates to come up with your MVP for a task, and also chunk your task out and do different things for measuring your productivity. I also have something in there for just looking at yourself in a more positive way, and it's just a little journal. And all these are free resources on theocpdcoach.com/resources. Make sure you check out if you're somebody who has OCPD or somebody who you're dealing with somebody who has and you want to help. Make sure you do head over to OCPD.org, and there is a forum on there. I encourage all of you to get involved in the forum. You can ask questions. It's less personal than Facebook. It's actually something that I used to take part in a long time ago as forums, and it's a very comfortable environment to be comfortable. I'll put it like that. And I would recommend you head there. I'll be in there answering questions where I can and trying to help out and ask them as well. Before I close off, Darryl, do you have any closing words?
I think you inadvertently came up with our next topic, which will be AI and mental health. But no, thank you. I really, really appreciate you having me on your channel. And it's, I think both of us need to go get a drink. Not an alcoholic drink. Wow, whatever you want. But yeah, we've been talking a long time. So no, thank you again for having me. And I think that was I was about to say productive discussion, but I mean, it was. So.
Hey, it is. Yeah, productive in multiple ways. Mental health. Hey, I'm smiling. If I didn't do this video, I don't know if I would have cracked a smile right now. So there you go. I'm ending the video now. I tend to actually have an outro, but this I'm not going to do a super cute outro. I do just want you all to make sure you fight for your life, and I'll see you in the next piece.